welcome. You're joining us at Hydepark on AdaDerana 24 tonight as we are awaiting news whether Sri Lanka's bailout package has been agreed upon, how far we are to go in terms of managing the situation with Sri Lanka's creditors in obtaining assurances from Sri Lanka's creditors to secure debt treatment in order to go ahead with the IMF bailout package. Who else are we to speak about this other than the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka? I've invited to our studios at Hydepark Dr. Nandalal Weerasinghe. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you. You're finally on this show. I'm sure you have much to share with us. But in recent times, we've been talking about the fact that by December, if Sri Lanka is unable to obtain the assurances of creditors, it might take at least until March 2023 to secure this $2.9 billion IMF bailout package. Will that take so long?
Yeah, no, I think I have to correct that statement. I have seen one of the media had reported if we miss the December target that we were expecting last month, and then it would be March. I think that is not correct. It all depends on our ability to obtain financing assurances from our bilateral creditors, mainly the Paris Club, India and China, three major bilateral creditors that they have given us loans. We have made a very good progress in terms of, if you can remember, we had bilateral meetings, two bilateral meetings, where we shared all the information with the creditors at that point. So even after that, through our advisors, through the IMF, we have shared a lot of information with them. Now all the creditors, they have sufficient information for them to determine or decide on what kind of contribution they have to make our debt sustainable or restore our debt sustainability over a long period. So first requirement is for us to get the financing assurance from all the creditors, either collectively or bilaterally, based on their understanding of their expected relief that they're going to give us. Then they tell the IMF that, okay, we are willing to give you we are willing to support the Sri Lanka to restore their debt sustainability based on the debt targets that IMF has set up. And once we reach that stage, then IMF will be able to go to the board and approve the program that we have presented. So the timeline is that earlier, obviously, we were making good progress, but there was a little delay with some of the creditors because there are a lot of internal issues. We were not able to meet getting the financial assurance within the month of November. If we were able to get it within the month of November, we were targeting 19th of December for the next IMF board meeting. But we have missed that for some reasons that I can't talk a lot about that. And then what we believe and what we think, if we have made a lot of progress. There are several partners already indicate their willingness to support Sri Lanka. If you look at the media also, the Paris Club, India and even China have expressed their willingness to support. So we need to get it in a formal way, kind of by a statement to the IMF, okay, we all are willing to support. So we are almost there in my view. So once we get that assurance, then IMF need only maximum 2-3 weeks for them to prepare all the board papers and circulate this with the board members and go to the board and get the program approved. For example, if we are able to get this within this month, then month of January, IMF can approve this program by the executive board, and then we can go on that basis. This is, I don't understand what is talk about the March on the basis of what I saw in one of the media reports saying that IMF board would be meeting not in December, again next March. That is not correct. I have been a member of the executive board of the IMF for some time ago, and usually IMF board meets at least 2 or 3 days a week, and 1 week agenda can be 10 items. So we can obviously, if we get the assurances within this month, we should be able to go to the board in January. So that is what we are targeting now. So we are working towards that. And we are working with all the partners. They have indicated their willingness. They are coming to support. They are engaging more with us than what is in last month. This is why we think we are making a good progress, and we should be able to meet that target. That's what we think.
So by January, you mean, Governor, that there should be some settlement and a way for Sri Lanka to secure this bailout arrangement?
This is what right now our plan, and we are working hard, both the government, the political authority, the central bank, the Minister of Finance, all are working towards that target.
You did mention that in November, there was an expectation to finalize this assurances, obtaining the assurances, but for unspeakable reasons or reasons that you cannot disclose now, that this was delayed. But currently, what is the progress? Is Sri Lanka's side, in terms of our documentation or whatever that is required from Sri Lanka's side to obtain these creditor assurances, are those in place?
Yeah, there was basically what there's a delay in terms of sharing a lot of information with all the creditors on equal and comparable and open basis. There was a delay in sharing necessary information with all the creditors at the same time. Also, it takes some time. For example, Paris Club. It's an institution that they basically are very familiar with this process. So once you share information with them, they have to do their own analysis. And this one, once they've done the analysis, they have to share with all the other creditors. So this is a process which takes some time because it involves a lot of technical work and do the analysis and look at each creditor wise and what kind of relief. All these things took some time more than what we expected. That was a delay. Now we have done all the information sharing, and Paris Club has done a lot of information. They are shared with other creditors. So in our view, now they have sufficient information with them. Now then it is up to the creditors to come back and tell, okay, we are willing to do this support. That's where we are.
A speculation on even international media is the China and India factor. Has there been any challenge for Sri Lanka in working with the international creditors because of India and China, or because Sri Lanka has to individually manage the two countries?
No, here because of the structure of the debt restructuring, there are a lot of countries, about I think 23 countries together in the Paris Club. It's very familiar. They have done it earlier, so they have experience. That dealing with them is easier with Paris Club because they have a lot of technical capacity. They have done this earlier, so that's where. But the India and China are non-Paris Club. They don't have much experience in doing this exercise compared to Paris Club. That is where we have to get the Paris Club as well as non-Paris Club members. This is why we have to deal separately with those two countries. Those are not Paris Club. But if they were somehow in the Paris Club, we would have done it already. That's where, because for example, this is also new to us. So we are doing it first time. Likewise, India and China wouldn't have that much of experience compared to Paris Club doing this. So they should take their own time for them to study and make a decision. That is what I think there was some delay.
You have served as an alternative executive director of the International Monetary Fund while you were deputy governor of the central bank, and you have the expertise in dealing with IMF. But how much is Sri Lanka versed in dealing with such matters? You said it's new for us in Sri Lanka, but in managing this situation, do we have the technical and other support required?
Yeah, in terms of dealing with IMF and dealing with IMF programs, in fact, as you know already, and we have announced in our media statements also, this is not new thing. With dealing with the IMF, this is the 17th time Sri Lanka, basically, Minister of Finance, Central Bank, basically are negotiating with the program with the IMF. But all the other times, it was not that complex or complicated. That was because we did not have a debt crisis. This is the first time we are seeking IMF support, not only for balance of payment support in terms of financing support and also overall macro-fiscal framework, but also we have to ensure our debt is sustainable. Government sovereign debt is sustainable. That is the additional complication this time. So in terms of our experience and dealing with IMF, I have been involved several times with the previous programs, and those are much simpler. For example, in 2008 and 9 program that we negotiated, within 2 months we negotiated, and then it was submitted in another couple of months. IMF approved this. This time, because of the debt unsustainability, and we have to restore the sustainability and ensure the creditors are given a relief, that is why it is taking a little more time than earlier. This is the only new part. In terms of IMF program, what I can say, this is a program owned by the government and the central bank, by our authorities. We have prepared ourselves. This is the way that we want to deal with, and this is the way we are going ahead. And then IMF endorses, look at this program, endorses it independently and telling other creditors, okay, this is a credible program. If the government authorities go through this program and it will restore its sustainability, it will recover the economy. On that basis, they invite others to support Sri Lanka with both ADB, World Bank, multilateral agencies as well as other bilateral creditors on the endorsement of the IMF as independent agency who have the expertise on this subject matter and the overall economic management.
I think I asked you this question when we met at the budget, post-budget discussion as well, whether a $2.9 billion bailout package would be sufficient to sort out Sri Lanka's financial issues. But how far will this IMF bailout program go in terms of resurrecting the country and bailing out the economy?
Yeah, in fact, it is not necessarily the amount of fund we are getting directly from the IMF. What is important is that their endorsement plus the financial support. So, what is more important to me is the IMF endorsement that we are in the right path. On the basis of that endorsement, and bonus is they are also giving some money on that endorsement. So, we implement the program, we will get $2.9 billion over a 4-year period. And on the endorsement, other agencies, even private sector creditors, FDIs, the portfolio investment, bilateral and multilateral creditors will also rely on that endorsement, and they will have more confidence on Sri Lanka, and they will continue to support. As a result, this external financing gap that we are estimated for next 3-4 years would be filled not only by the IMF but also by the other partners who will be helping with the confidence of the IMF program. That is the whole the rationale for going to the IMF, is to get a independent endorsement so that everyone else can believe that Sri Lanka is going in the right path in terms of overall macroeconomic management and the reforms.
Greece too suffered a financial crisis between 2009 and 2016, but we've seen a former Greek finance minister calling the IMF bailout that was secured by Greece as a Ponzi austerity. And here in Sri Lanka too, we see allegations that that this will be an economic crime. How do you respond to this, and in relation to what Greece went through as well?
Yeah, you see, it's difficult to compare the Greece situation and Sri Lanka. It's completely two different economic framework management. Greece is a member of the European Union, and they have limitations in terms of the exchange rate policy, because they don't have independent monetary policy, because they are a euro country in terms of the monetary policy. They have to abide by the rules set out by the European Central Bank for monetary policy, as well as European Union in terms of fiscal policy. So when the country like, and also they have backup from the European EU countries as well as backup from the IMF. That is where their backup came from combination of some of the European countries as well as it's a different structure. So because Greece wouldn't have an independent monetary policy, they could not basically adjust themselves by depreciating a currency because they are fixed to the euro. So then only the adjustment that can happen, internal devaluation, what they call. They have to reduce their wages, cut their wages, loss of huge amount of employment. Those are much more painful reforms for the Greece. That is why probably that minister or advisor said for country like Greece, because of their economic structure, it's going to be it was much more painful experience making that adjustment internally without any adjustment to the external accounts. This is where the problem. So that's why it's difficult to compare Greece and Sri Lanka. But if you want to compare any comparison with the IMF packages, you compare what happened to India, similar situation in 1991, and what happened in Korea in 1997. Mm-hmm. So those countries had this similar bailout packages in 1991 with India. They did the right things and they never went back to the IMF since 1999. They are back to a stable path. Even Korea in 1997, even Indonesia came during the Asian crisis. Those are the examples that we should compare how IMF package IMF bailout has worked successfully, and countries have come out and consistently how they recover and stabilize the economy next 20, 30 years. So those are the experiences. I think this is the comparison, that right comparison. Greece and Sri Lanka is not a right comparison. It's like apple and pears.
You spoke of India. So how long do you think a country as our closest neighbor, that structure took, Governor, with your experience and your understanding, for Sri Lanka also to come out of this crisis post IMF bailout?
Yeah. It's in fact the commitment of the authorities, both the government and the central bank and the parliament, their ability to implement the things that they have agreed and continue on the same direction continuously and go in the same direction. This is what India had done, this is what Korea had done, this is what Indonesia had done. So if we do what we think right things only during the program period, and if we turn around 180 degrees and going back to the same practices, then this is the reason why we had been going to IMF 16 times. That's why India had not gone to again, Korea had not gone, Indonesia had not gone again, because once they agree to program, there is ownership by the authorities, the public, that this is the right way that we should go, and then everyone should be supporting and going in the same direction, so that we would need to go back to the bailout package, or we would not go to the debt issues again. So this is our responsibility. It is not, the IMF can't impose. They can impose only for a limited period. Beyond that, if we continue, if we change the directions, then obviously we will go back in the wrong direction. If we go in the same direction, I'm sure, like all the countries did, we can recover the economy, stabilize, and bring back the normalcy, and the recovery, living standards of people can be uplifted if we go in that direction.
Two questions here. Do you think we in Sri Lanka, the people, have an understanding of the adjustments that will have to be made within the country post IMF a bailout program, and how painful it is going to be, or whether it's going to be painful for Sri Lanka, and also whether there is political will, in your observation, to ensure that this policy consistency you just mentioned about can be maintained?
This is an important question. One is there will be a pain in the short term. So short term stabilization obviously will have pain. That's why you see economy is contracting by 8%. This year inflation has gone up to 70%. We don't have liquid resource almost zero. So there's a painful process. So recover from that short term, the crisis situation, to stabilize, that will be the painful process. But going beyond that, continue, once you do the adjustment and go in the same direction continuously, there should be a broad public support. That is why it's important. For example, now, let's say electricity tariff hike, or tax hike, or high interest rates. If we have to raise interest rates, we have to raise it to stabilize the economy. If the government will have to raise tariffs to minimize the cost on taxpayers and recover cost recovery basis, that has to happen. If the other prices, petrol prices will have to be adjusted, will have to be adjusted. So this is where it's important for people and everyone to understand the necessity of these reforms going forward and maintaining the situation. This is where we have missed in the past. That's why if you look at last 8-9 years, there is no tariff adjustment for electricity. Several years there was no petroleum price adjustments despite global prices going up. This is where these institutions were making huge losses, and people are paying for that and burden on the taxpayers. So this is where the difficult reforms, and we have to understand, we have to get the people understand, we have to get the public support, and public should be asking for these reforms, not necessarily the government or central bank or the Ministry of Finance imposing this. Without public support, that won't sustain. This is why it is important to communicate and tell the truth to the public. This is the true situation. There will be painful process in short term, but going forward, if we continue, everyone will be benefiting. So that understanding, communication, getting people supporting the reforms, difficult ones, is very, very important for us to sustain. This is why Sri Lanka has failed in the past. And if you look at, say, whenever elections are coming up, then usually that's why people are asking, tax is too much, why do you not reduce taxes? And petrol prices are too much, why do you not cut the petrol prices? The people are asking for that. The people, the representatives, those are elected by people, will have to deliver that. But people are asking, please do the right thing. don't put the burden on the Petroleum Corporation or CPC on us by imposing taxes. We are willing to pay the right price. If you use it, then please do that. If the people are asking for that, then it's easier for the government to implement that. So this is why it's important people like yours or media should explain these are the right things. This will benefit in the long term. So get the public support. Without that, no reform can sustain without the public support. That's an important point.
Also about policy consistency, Governor, do you think there is political will going forward to ensure that Sri Lanka sticks to these policies and ensures that Sri Lanka maintains such, to move away from a handout-based economy to a more sustained economic growth trajectory?
Yeah. To me, political will is what the public will. Political will is what public is asking for the politicians to do. So this is where it is important, if the people of the country are asking something basically not right, then they will deliver that. This is why I think with the crisis it's an opportunity. In my view, because of the crisis, because of the painful process, people have a much better understanding of the right things. If you remember some time ago, anytime say increasing petroleum prices, restructuring all the institutions and increasing taxes, people were objecting a lot more than people objecting now, although it's a difficult time, but people now have a better understanding of right things. I think this is why the political will depend on what people's will, people's understanding. So a lot of people asking wrong things, obviously then political will be different and we will go back to the same situation.
Before we go in for a short break, I want to ask you again to clarify about this, about the people, about the middle income earners, especially who are hardly hit now. Whether once with these difficult times, the painful austerity measures that will kick in, whether they will be pushed into the poverty line, and how all that large segment of the society is going to be managed to until Sri Lanka secures a better growth path.
Yeah, this is again another important question. For example, now when country going through this economic crisis, obviously there will be people who will be falling in below poverty line. People who are just on the border will certainly be falling in poverty line. This is where the adverse impact of the economic crisis would be felt by the lowest income people and poor and vulnerable in the country. This is why its government should ensure the social safety net, and this is why even the one condition by the IMF is that government need to protect the expenditure on social safety net, so that people who have been falling below the poverty line should be supported by the people who are earning more, the taxpayers. So this is, so for government to support the people who are falling below poverty line, people are poor and vulnerable, government should have some money. How government can have some revenues is only through taxation. There's no other way. Otherwise, government will have to ask the central bank to print money. That's not going to work because we are seeing the experience of printing too much money now. So this is where obviously short term it will be difficult. But once the economy recovers, these people who are falling below the poverty, idea is to recover economy, this will be graduating and coming out of the poverty, so that they can also contribute to the economic activities, and they can also contribute to social safety net people who are below, and then there's an equitable allocation of resources, focusing more towards the most affected are the poor and vulnerable.
You say printing money is not a viable solution, but there is accusation that you're the central bank governor who has minted the largest amount of money in Sri Lanka's history, but we'll talk about that when we return after this short break at Hydepark on AdaDerana 24. Welcome back. We are in conversation with Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Nandalal Weerasinghe, who's leading Sri Lanka's debt negotiation talks and also ensuring that the central bank remains independent. You've been talking about this, central bank independence, Dr. Weerasinghe, but is it really attainable? Is it possible within Sri Lanka's political setup? You said central bank doesn't want to be a part of popular decisions. But could you really distance yourself?
You know, this is an important element in any country's prosperity. You need an independent central bank. I'll tell you why. Say the key there's one of the only the main objective of central bank is to maintain price stability. That is to maintain low and stable inflation. Like in our case, we are supposed to maintain inflation between 4 to 6%. But if you look at the last several years, I mean last 2-3 years, inflation now from about 4 to 6% we had earlier, but went up to gradually increasing and now ended up 70% maximum. Now it's coming down. So why we have failed is that because we have not been able to make monetary policy decisions independently because of the fiscal dominance. So that is what we, for central bank to achieve its main objective, which is the price stability or maintaining low and stable inflation. Central bank should be able to implement monetary policy, proactive monetary policy on time, without that being influenced by any other government or fiscal policy. What happened last 2 years, as I mentioned earlier, is that because of some of the provision in the current Monetary Central Bank Act, which says if the government cannot finance their budget deficit, raising money through domestic market to external market, then the balance, there's a provision, central bank can monetize, print money and finance the deficit. So that is what has happened in 2020 mainly, 2021 whole year, and to a certain extent 2022 as well. When the central bank does that, when the government fiscal policy, treasury asking to print money, the central bank does it, then it is inflationary. Central bank cannot meet the objective of its key objective of the inflation target. This is why in the new law, what is proposed by this global best practice, central bank monetary policy should not be influenced by the government or the parliament or by the fiscal policy. It's the authority of the parliament. That's why it should be independent to take the right decision on monetary policy so that country can have a low and stable inflation. Central bank is responsible for maintaining country's finances, including the setting interest rates, interest in exchange rates, and maintaining reserves, sufficient low reserves for the whole country. The fiscal policy only a part of the country economy is the government, taxpayers' money. That is the authority of the parliament. If there is a conflict between those two, central bank will not be able to achieve its own objective. Then country will fail. This is what has happened. Historically, why we have not been able to maintain low and stable inflation. If you look at last 30-40 years, still inflation has been 12% on average. That is because high fiscal deficits influence the central bank printing too much money into the inflation. We have failed. This is the key issue that has to be addressed, making central bank independent of not having influence from fiscal policy or fiscal policy of the government. That's the important part. So in the new law, it should ensure that independence, maintain that conflict and address conflict and maintain independence. But central bank as a public institution, at the same time with the independence, it should be also accountable to the public, to the parliament. That's another important part. You shouldn't have any institution only with the independence without accountability. That is where the accountability provisions also should be strengthened. Monetary board and the governor should be, parliament should be able to summon the monetary board, the governor, and ask a question, why you have these policies. We should be able to explain to the parliament, we should be able to explain to the public why we are maintaining high interest rates for the time being, where we think inflation going to be, why we should publish inflation report so that our future monetary action will be like this. It will have impact on not only the fiscal policy but also all business. SMEs, everyone will have impact on our interest rate policy. That's why people are now basically asking interest rates are too high. That's because that's affecting not only the government but also SMEs and public. But what is the most important one is to curtail inflation. If you don't curtail inflation, no one can do business. If you go into hyperinflation situation like what we had seen in Zimbabwe, all businesses collapse, all economy will collapse. Then we will go to another crisis. If we don't control the inflation first. Now, the positive impact of our policies is that now we see inflation has already peaked. It is on a downward path. The peak that was going to be 100%, we stopped at 70%, and now it is coming down fast, and we will continue to see inflation coming down fast. With that, we think interest rates also should be coming down, so that there will be a relief not only for the government, for all the people who are doing businesses, and who should be able to bear the low interest rates going forward. And also, if you look at the deposit points of view, if you deposit money in a bank, and inflation is 60%, value of your deposit would be eroded by 60%. The real value of your deposit would be eroded by 60%. The interest you get is 25%. So if you had 100 rupees in the bank, the real value would be reduced to 40 rupees. And even 25% interest would not be sufficient for you to gain the real value of that money. That's why it has a both side impact. Depositors, savers would be losing, borrowers would be benefiting, low interest rate, but we have to have the right balance between those two until we get the inflation more sustainable, stable 4 to 6%. Then borrowers can borrow at say 9-10%. The depositor will get at least 6% the interest, so that is better than the inflation. The real value of the money would be kept at the same level. That is the whole idea of monetary policy. For central bank to implement the monetary policy, central bank should be independent, should not be implement interest rate policy that is only influenced by the government for fiscal policy. Should not be pumping too much money only to benefit the government to bring down the finance the fiscal deficit, but this is for the whole country. That is why central banks are all over the world. Monetary policy should be set independently and also with accountability.
You talk about striking that balance in inflation, but I'm looking at this document that has been circulating. So it says during your time so far you've minted some 3.37 billion rupees every day. Is this even bearable to the Sri Lankan economy when you're talking about managing inflation and that printing money is not a solution, Governor?
Yeah, I think this is a very poor and incompetent knowledge of the what they call money printing. Unfortunately, people who held high position at the central bank is still not competent and enough to understand what money printing is. Money printing by the central bank is not the treasury bill holdings or what we purchase as treasury bill. Is only a part of the overall monetary expansion by the central bank. There are two components. One is what we call reserve money. The money central bank put out into the banking system over a period of time. That's what called strong base money or reserve money. Then banks can create that money to what they call broad money. That central bank put out 1 rupee to the banking system. Bank and over period can create about 8 times 1 rupee can be made 8 rupees through this credit process. So what has happened so far, I mean, I don't want is comparing this day during this period is again reflect the very poor knowledge of the understanding of this monetary policy. I don't want to answer that question, but I can say, in fact, the numbers that I just would like to share. The change in reserve money is what they call currency in circulation. That all the currency in circulation in the economy plus deposits of the banking system with the central bank. Those are the two components. So during the year 2020, the reserve money expanded by 31.6 billion during 2020. Earlier, it was much less. Then 2021, it expanded by 341 billion. It's almost 10 times of 2020. This is that was the peak of the COVID, but still 2020, in 2021, 10 times of the increase in reserve money, which is what called printed out by the central bank, 10 times increase, 341. And 2022, from January to October, so far, it increased by only 47 billion. You can see the kind of a contraction or expansion was so huge in 2021, and we have been able to slow down the expansion and come to a basically very low level with the given inflation. So, for example, other example is currency in circulation. So, in 2020, the currency in circulation, that is money in your hands, not in the banks, in your hand, currency in circulation increased by 156 billion during 2020. It has increased by further 170 billion within the period 2021, and then so far this year it has increased by 21 billion. It's 170 came out. So this is how this has happened. This is because we from the central bank, since I came in, we tightened the monetary policy, raised interest rates, currency those were in circulation came into the banking system, so that banks had a lot more liquidity than earlier. Currency, when people have a lot of currency in circulation, excess money, that's going after the people's goods and services, that will increase the inflation. So to address that inflation, we encourage people to deposit their money in the banking system, so that money in circulation was reduced drastically. That is how we have been able to curtail the amount of money printed. So any comparison of this period treasury holdings or something, that is reflects the incompetence of the person who done this analysis. That's all I can say.
Repatriation of export proceeds is a hot topic now in recent times, especially with the Justice Minister claiming that staggering $53 billion has not been repatriated to Sri Lanka during the past 12 years by exporters, including $3 billion just last year alone. If you may shed some light.
Yeah, I think that statement, Minister Rajapaksa also was based on one of the Sunday newspapers report. I think he was quoting that. I think this is one thing I have to make it clear here. That was basically linked to what I said in terms of export repatriation and some of the report earlier, what they call Global Integrity Report, which was published by some global institution based in, I think, Washington, D.C., based on the analysis. There are two things combined together and reported in a different and misinterpreted. I want to make it very clear first. First one is that Global Integrity Report. I think I am still trying to find that the report. I can remember someone told me about in 2016 or 17 or recently. They had claimed that from Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan people keeping money abroad over a period of time, this amount of say 34 billion or something like that, some abroad, but we don't have basically information or evidence to confirm that from Sri Lankan authorities side or Central Bank or Ministry of Finance. That was system issued by somewhere else. And what I said is basically we implemented this export proceeds repatriation mechanism from July onwards. That was as a result of in 2021 towards the end of, I think from August, Central Bank brought in a rule that any exporter who export something from Sri Lanka and they are supposed to repatriate 100% of that export, say 1 billion exports per month, they have to repatriate 1 billion. And after that, they should convert 25% of that into rupees. That is a conversion. One is a repatriation requirement, other one is conversion requirement. So we started monitoring this from July onwards, and on the basis of October and September data, what I said is basically out of the exports that went out of the country, they have repatriated or brought into a banking system almost 100%. It is not that they are keeping abroad. So I want to make it very clear, they have brought, based on those 2 months data, they have brought in almost 100% money into a banking system.
This was during?
Month of October and September and October, those 2 months, based on export data that we got from the customs and all the banks. They repatriated 100%, but they have converted only on average 25%. So here difference, discrepancy is that, say for example, what we understand is that when we export say 100 million worth of dollars, there's a component called local value addition. For example, garment industry, they say local value addition would be 50%. If the 50% local value addition, they should spend that 50% money locally, convert into rupees and spend that money. But the evidence based on the data available for us, it says instead of 50%, it was only 25% maximum. So there's a balance of 25% which has not been converted. Now we are asking questions from the exporters. Okay, you say, bank says you had converted only 25%. So you please tell us what happened to this 25% balance which was not converted. Repatriated 100%, but converted only 25%. 25% is kind of a unexplained part. So what now the information what we are getting is that 25% probably they pay in US dollars to their CPC for petroleum or pay to their indirect supplier. So that we are collecting that information. When we get that information, we will issue an announcement, make a statement clearly showing top 100 exporters. These are the things they exported. This is the amount of money they brought in. This is the amount they converted. This is the amount that paid in dollars to others. And it will make it clear that this is a situation. And also I want to emphasize this point. people claiming that exporters are not keeping abroad so much billions of dollars somewhere else, like 53 or 43 or 34. If you look at country's role in 1994, since 1994 until 2016, the law of this country allowed exporters to keep money abroad if they want. There was no repatriation requirement, there was no conversion requirement from 1994 until 2016. So the long period of time, because government has permitted exporters, if they want to keep their money abroad for business purposes, this was legally permitted. Now, it's something that was legally permitted. Now you can't say because that's illegal. You see, that was the law of the country. It was permitted until 2016. Only 2016, then government brought back the what they call repatriation requirement. That they have to bring that money into the country instead of keeping it. It was not only 2016, and then 2021 last year, because of the balance of payment crisis, foreign exchange liquidity issue, central bank issued a direction. Not only you should bring 100%, but also you should convert the balance part and sell it in the banks. This is a new regulation. Again, if you look at why exporters are keeping money abroad, or not converting, want to keep in dollars, this was again in the system where central bank kept the exchange rate at 203. And there was a outside market because exporters, everyone, for people who earn foreign exchange knew this 203 fixed rate is not going to be sustainable. This is why we saw in the last year onwards, when central bank maintained 203 cap, and outside market people offering 240, 60, 50. So that was an incentive for exporters to keep that money in dollars and sell it outside at high rate. And that is the incentive was created by the central bank, fixing the rate at 203, which was unsustainable. And then exporters, everyone understood, this is not going to be sustainable. They have opportunity to sell at 260. Why should I sell it to the bank and get 203? Instead, I have opportunity to take 260 somewhere outside. That is where the incentive was created by the wrong policy of the central bank that time and fixing the rate at this rate. And it's not sustainable rate. And at that rate, obviously, credit was going to depreciate further. Everyone realized that they just kept that practice. As a result, probably some money kept somewhere else, so kept in the banking system without converting. Now the system is that we have little more flexible exchange rate regime, and there's nothing fixed here. It's a completely different system now we are employing. There's no incentive for exporters to keep, because there's no black market now. What banks are offering and black markets are all the same. Now there's no incentive for exporters to keep that money and selling outside because there's no incentive in the system. That we have addressed that. As a result, that's why we are asking exporters to please show us either you convert or show us why you have not converted. So
do you think this will encourage exporters to convert the foreign exchange earnings?
That's what we have seen. That's what we have seen in the recent past. That's how we have been able to manage, and we also recognize the role of the exporters at this point. Only because of the exporters bringing that money to convert it, that's the only reason why we have been able to provide, then reduce the queues, supply gas essentials, and country has become a lot more normal than those days. It's because exporters are doing their business, earning at least $1 billion a month and converting some of the parts and use some of the money to pay for their raw materials or whatever local payments. As a result, economy is functioning smoothly. But we also expect the exporters have a responsibility. If they export something from the country, there is a commitment, especially in this kind of a crisis situation. They have the moral obligation, responsibility to bring that money into the country and use that money for the use of the country at the time of need in terms of balance of payment crisis. Once we get a lot more money, other inflows from the IMF or somewhere going forward, we can relax this. I mean, personally, I don't like this kind of strict administrative rule-based things. Those are not going to work. You have to create right incentives in a market-oriented economy so that we encourage people to voluntarily bring that money, convert and do their business without having all these rules implemented, that is not helping the businesses or even exporters.
But what about protecting these exporters too? What regulations do you think the central bank will initiate in protecting and ensuring that these exporters can grow and be sustained within this country? Because we see that in the past too, many investments, especially into apparel or this export-driven businesses, have moved to other regional competitor nations as investments. That's one question. And the other question, Governor, in terms of Foreign Exchange Act, and during the past, this crisis period, we noticed the lapses, the weaknesses in repatriating money, especially workers' remittances. What new measures?
Yeah, in terms of promoting exports, I think the key one from the policy perspective is to maintain a right fundamental exchange rate which should encourage exports. For example, if you look at last several years, or last 2 years especially, when the exchange rate was maintained at 203, when inflation was going to go up for 50–60%, then obviously that is not an incentive for exporters to grow their businesses. Once we allow a lot more flexibility, which ensures that businesses would be competitive, people who own foreign exchange would be competitive, then that is an incentive, an encouragement for the people to engage in export-oriented foreign exchange earning businesses. That is where you see, I mean, best example is that during this crisis, economy is contracting by 8%. If you look at the sectors, those are surviving and doing their business normally are only the sectors which are earning foreign exchange, either in terms of people going abroad and earning foreign exchange, or people who are exporting something earning foreign exchange, or people who are selling foreign exchange, like tourism and foreign exchange earning sectors, those who can survive. This is the example of how people incentivize industries to move more towards foreign exchange earning sectors. Even sectors, for example, say construction sector has affected a lot. But as you said, garment sector, now they are moving out. I don't see that a problem. For example, if the garment sector, if we have local companies who have developed the expertise, are expanding globally, and if they see opportunity in somewhere, say Africa or India, that is basically Sri Lankan company becoming a multilateral company. So that's how businesses are growing. If they see another business opportunity, it's not that they are moving completely out of here to other country. They are expanding their business somewhere else, taking business opportunity, taking opportunities for their businesses, and expanding their presence, and earning a lot more foreign exchange as a local company. So then obviously opportunities may be different from time to time. For example, garment exports, this country can no longer be sustained with cheap labor. We don't have cheap labor. So they have to move out into the high-tech industries. Industrial exports will have to move into high-tech industries. Services exports will have to move into logistics, education, and IT BPO. Those are the new sectors. So we need to allow this transition of the industries towards more foreign exchange and have the right exchange rate policy, so that there will be incentives, so people will naturally move into those sectors, and it is the only way out. Unless we become, people call Sri Lanka as an import-dependent country. As soon as we are import-dependent country, we won't come out of this crisis. We have to make Sri Lanka as an export-oriented economy, foreign exchange earning-oriented economy, rather than import-dependent economy. That transition will have to happen. That's the only way out for Sri Lanka.
I have a few minutes to ask you a couple of questions, but I'll ask you all this in. I remember speaking to you when there was news here that you will be appointed governor, or there has been an invitation for you to take up the post of governor of Central Bank when you were in Australia. So I asked you whether this is something you would actually take, and you said yes, given the right independence, you will be able to manage it. But now you're here in this crisis, managing it within the country, together with other political leaders. Do you think you have the right the strategies in place? And again, going back to that political question of political will, so that both parties can come together to solve this country's crisis? And what expectations do you have, not just at the end of this year, but going forward? The president himself said he's looking at an export-oriented economy, an economy that looks at 2050.
48.
Yes. So, how do you look at this, and is this something that you can still do?
Yeah, I think as far as central bank independence is concerned, since I came in, I am very satisfied that I have been able to exercise independence which is required for the central bank and the monetary board as an institution. We have been able to implement all the policies independently and right. Not so popular. That's why what's important for the central bank cannot implement only popular policies. Central bank should implement right policies independently. That is why monetary board and the governor of central bank should not be influenced, should not be person who is politically oriented, shouldn't have any political ambitions. They should be, once monetary board and governor should be able to make decisions independently. I can tell you I have been able to do that so far. And with the Monetary Central Banking Act strengthened, whether irrespective of person who is holding the current position, anyone who is coming in replacing me should be able to exercise that independence by the law. That's an important one. And going forward, this is where I think the crisis is an opportunity. This is where what I expect, something happened to India in 1991, and something happened to Korea in 1997, Indonesia in 1997. Those countries were able to come out of this crisis and address the debt issues, not the similar issues that we are experiencing now. We are in a much deeper crisis than those countries were having at that point. And I think this is the last opportunity. We should not miss this opportunity. We should move in the right direction consistently and predictable manner in the same direction, so that I hope that we will not be going back to the bailing out the country. We will not be going and asking restructuring our debt from our creditors. We can stand on our own with the relief that we are expecting from the creditors and support from the international partners. So we should be able to survive ourselves with right policies and consistent, predictable medium term, so that we can come out of this crisis like India did in 1991, like Korea did in 1997. So we have opportunity. I think this is where I think country should be going forward. Hope that people will also be supporting, public will be supporting in this journey towards that direction.
A career central bank of nearly 3 decades of experience working at the central bank, retired as a deputy governor and was invited back to take over the position of central bank governor. Thank you very much for your time here, Governor. That's all we have. But thank you for your expertise and your knowledge, and of course updating us on the process ahead.
Thank you very much.
We had with us Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Nandalal Weerasinghe, joining us here at Hydepark on AdaDerana 24. We'll see you again next week at the same time with yet another discussion. Until then, take care.